Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Paideia Institute online lecture series. It is my great pleasure today to introduce Donato Verardi, who is the Mary Curie Fellow at the Department of Philosophy and Cultural Heritage at the Ca' Foscari University of Venice. Donato Verardi is a historian of philosophy and science with a specialization in the relationship between magic and modern science. His recent work has considered presentations of Aristotle as a magus, as well as the role of magic, technology, and material culture at the dawn of the modern world. He is the author of La Scienza e Segreti della Natura a Napoleonal Rinascimento at Firenze University Press, 2018, the editor of Aristotelianism and Magic in Early Modern Europe, Philosophers, Experimenters, and Wonderworkers, Bloomsbury, 2023, and the co-editor with Rebecca Compton of Magical Materials in Renaissance Philosophy, Literature, and Art, Agora & Co., 2022. He is series editor of the Anthem Impact in History of Natural Magic, Anthem Press, and editor-in-chief of the academic journal Arcana Natura, included in the Anver list of A-class journals, Logic, History, and Philosophy of Science. Please take it away, Donato.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Megan, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here today. I'm trying to share my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Not quite yet.
You have the same problem. Can you see it?
Yes, it's coming. Yep.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hit that hide button one more time if you don't mind, and then
Okay.
yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's start it. When it comes to Aristotelians and Aristotelianism, it is necessary to clarify the meaning of the expression thinking in an Aristotelian fashion, which can differ in certain places and at certain times, depending on which texts are attributed to Aristotle and which among them are the specific objects of the discussion. The same clarification is desirable when using the term magic, an equivocal, complex, and liminal term often attached in the early modern period to other tricky terms, such as natural, mathematical, and theurgic. In its deleterious meaning, magic was also connected to the notion of goëtia, that is the fourth theurgy practiced with the help of evil demons. The fact is said that several apocryphal books on topics related to the vast and elusive plans of magic were attributed to Aristotle well explains the need to delineate more precisely the role of the philosopher's authority in these discussions. This lecture is devoted to the Aristotelian foundation of magical knowledge as promoted in the work of Francesco Storella, a philologist and a professor of logic in Naples and Salerno, and one of the first teachers of the famous Magus Giordano Bruno. My aim is to show how this foundation occurs in Storella on a double-track philological and philosophical. The heart of this cultural operation is, as we will see, Storella's edition and commentary of the Secretum Secretorum, carried out during the years of his stay in Naples. In his commentary on the Secretum Secretorum, a work that he attributes to Aristotle and published in Naples and Venice in 1555, Storella defines the Magus as the wise man. Storella links his commentary on the Secretum Secretorum to the lessons of authors such as Albertus Magnus, Marsilio Ficino, and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. By constructing an image of Aristotle as a magus, an expert not only in logic, physics, and metaphysics, but also, as the Secretum Secretorum helps to show, in the so-called occult or secret sciences. My goal is also to show how Storella's peculiar image of Aristotle as a magus suggests that Aristotelian philosophy can also be used to justify beneficial magic, namely that part of natural magic capable of producing poisons erroneously traced back to the diabolical practices of the so-called witches. The justification of beneficial magic on an epistemological level, which stems from ideas implicit in Storella's works of the knowledge of the singular and the marvelous in nature, leads in turn to refuting the belief in witchcraft practices, considered, even from an ethical point of view, extraneous to the most authentic lessons of Aristotelianism and to true magic. In this scientific and ethical mission of Storella's proposal, Aristotle's reasons intersect with those of natural magicians of the time. Storella's intellectual story thus gives us a picture of the relationship that Aristotelianism and magic entertained in early modern Italy and of their common reform mission. Storella's primary purpose was to guarantee a logic to the occult, looking at the singular and irregular phenomena which were the prerogative of natural magic with the eyes of Aristotle himself. Storella was born in Alessano, a small town in the region of Otranto, the land of Otranto, around 1529, and he died in Naples in 1575. He was introduced to philosophical studies by his father Giovanni, who was a disciple of Pietro Pomponazzi. In 1549, in Padua, he received the academic degree Doctor Artium and earned the title of public lector after his discussion of the 150 Conclusiones. In 1550, Storella moved to Naples, where he became friends with Simone Porzio and Giovanni Bernardino Longo. In 1557, Storella taught at the Studium in Salerno and published the Libellus an singulare syllogismus in Gredi. The following year, in 1558, he returned to Naples. This is a significant date since in that same year, the first edition of the Magia Naturalis sive de Miraculis Rerum Naturalium by Giambattista della Porta appeared in Naples at Matthias' Cancer. Magia Naturalis became a fundamental work for those sections of naturalistic research which were committed to the study of secreta naturae, the secret of nature. 1558 is also the year in which Storella held a series of lectures in Naples, which were published as De Utilitate Logices in 1561. Using an Aristotelian framework, the Utilitate Logices allowed Storella to make a further contribution to the scientific legitimation of the investigation into singulars, that is, the rare or unusual empirical data which are the objects of the natural magician's investigation. In this lecture, Storella emphasizes how Aristotelian logic could be considered a cognitive tool of the natural admirandum. Here, the author first insists on the logical foundation of natural magic and astrology, underlining how logic, if also understood in its nature as an instrument, can be useful both for the foundation of an astrology based on mathematical logic, as Ptolemy teaches in the Centiloquium and in the Quadripartitum, and to the constitution of a natural magic in turn based on astrology, which is considered a cognitive tool of the natural admirandum opposed to diabolical deceptions. In support of this, Torella recounts an episode that took place in Salerno while he was teaching there. At the home of a noble, he saw a manuscript of the Picatrix. Disgusted, he immediately looked away from the manuscript, but not before reading that the foundation of magic is in astrology, without which no experiment can be carried out. For Storella, who reinterprets a passage from the strictly forbidden Picatrix in the light of his own conception of natural magic, astrology guarantees the validity of the experiments promoted by this discipline, hence also its central role in natural magic. The rational structure of astrology, guaranteed by its logical and geometric mathematical status, would thus theoretically base natural magic, transforming an otherwise solely empirical art into a philosophically based art. The close link between Aristotelianism and astrology promoted by Storella in Naples is not in itself an unusual element in the cultural landscape of early modern Italy. Astrology was taught in universities, and at that time it was considered to be the modern science of all the so-called occult or secret sciences. In the Italian context, texts such as Ptolemy's Almagest or the Centiloquium were included in arts, astrology, and medical curricula, alongside many other medical astrological texts. Before Storella, Pietro Pomponazzi, the greatest of the Renaissance Aristotelians, had previously resorted to making astrology an essential tool in his project of rational understanding of those occult phenomena otherwise outside Aristotelian science. Storella, however, seems to go beyond Pomponazzi himself. For him, astrology is not simply an auxiliary tool for the Aristotelian philosopher. Astrology, and with it natural magic, are themselves an integral part of Aristotelianism, since, as the Secretum Secretorum shows, they are disciplines practiced by Aristotle himself. Therefore, Aristotle being a magus and an astrologer means, according to Storella, that these disciplines must necessarily be consistent with Aristotle's conception of logic, which justifies them as key components of philosophy. By bringing magic and astrology back into the sphere of Aristotelianism, Storella suggests that the plausibility that a work such as the Secretum Secretorum could be attributed to Aristotle. Since its reception in the Islamic Middle Ages, the Secretum Secretorum helped establish Aristotle's image as a philosopher, sage, and magus with consummate knowledge of occult properties and astral influences. Very early doubts were raised about the Aristotelian attribution of the secretum, which was already a bestseller in the Middle Ages. The fact is that although it has never been included in the university curriculum, numerous professors from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance referred to it in their comments on the Aristotelians, on other Aristotelian works. Storella was among those who in the 16th century supported attributing the work to Aristotle. In the preface to the Secretum Secretorum, he points out that the secretum is worthy of study regardless of the identification of its author. This is a statement that takes on greater significance when one knows the list of topics that Storella deems worthy of learning from the Secretum. In addition to the doctrine of good governance and war, he mentions the study of aspects of the planets and the partition of the time, the occult virtues of plants and stones, physiognomics, and alchemy. Storella recalls how the attribution is denied by Giovanni Pico della Mirandola in the Disputationes adversus Astrologiam Divinatrice and Gianfrancesco Pico in his De Rerum Praenotione, but is supported by other equally authoritative authors, such as, among others, Albertus Magnus, Peter of Habano, Bartolomeo Moles, Bartolomeo Cocles, Agostino Nifo, Cristoforo Marcello, and Alessandro Achillini, the author of the 1501 edition of the Secretum Secretorum. In the Secretum Secretorum, the astrological element is central, especially in regard to the medical theme of human complexions, which the author places in relation to the natures of the planets. It is a cosmological and anthropological conception which, strongly characterized by astrology, was already rooted in a certain medical tradition in the Middle Ages. Think of Peter of Abano, whom Storella quotes in his commentary on the Secretum Secretorum, and continue to appear in works by some Renaissance peripatetic philosophers such as Achillini, Bartolomeo Cocles della Rocca, and then Storella himself. According to this medico-astrological tradition, of which Storella himself is a part, the stars do not act by virtue of their substantial form, that is formaliter, but effective. This doctrine of the complexion of the planets, which also finds support in the Secretum Secretorum, shows how the planets must be considered in relation to their effects, for which they are provided with the same combinations of elementary physical qualities as in the sublunary world, cold, hot, wet, and dry. As in human temperaments, the complexion derives from the combination of their qualities and their proportion, so the complexio stellarum is ordered in the manner of human nature. In fact, the complexio stellarum tends to hot or cold, dry or wet. This conception of the cosmos and of human being underlies the Secretum Secretorum, and therefore allows Storella to justify the Aristotelian nature of some secret sciences. Storella first addresses the problem of the astrological foundation of what was considered at the time the most Aristotelian of the secret sciences, physiognomy. Although in the short section of the Secretum dedicated to physiognomy, the relationship of this discipline to astrology is only implicit, it is explained in the section dedicated to medicine, a discipline with which physiognomy is strongly connected. In his sober annotation relating to physiognomy, Storella links this problem to the previous treatment by Achillini, continued by his pupil Cocles, author of Chiromantiae ac Physiognomiae Anastasis. Citing the condemnation of chiromancy by Gianfrancesco Pico della Mirandola, but supported by the doctrines of the Secretum Secretorum and its Renaissance followers, Storella locates both chiromancy and physiognomy within an astrological medical approach that he recognizes to be characteristic of Aristotle's philosophy. This same approach, the result of a very precise conception of the cosmos and of the human being presented by the Secretum, also underlies the justification that Storella proposes for alchemy. The author of the Secretum Secretorum refers several times to Hermes Trismegistus, thus configuring himself as a Hermetic Aristotle. Storella, in a chapter of the Secretum dedicated to alchemy, significantly refers to a very old Neapolitan code of the Trismegistus, which he was able to view in Naples thanks to the diligence of his pupil Aniello Torboli. Although it is not explicitly stated, we can affirm that the code of the Trismegistus contained another version of the Emerald Tablet, a founding text of Renaissance alchemy. This can be deduced from the fact that almost all Storella's commentary on the chapter De Alchimia of the Secretum Secretorum consists of a transcription of this text. Storella states that he chose to publish the text here because it is a little different from the one presented by Aristotle in the Secretum Secretorum. An element of no small interest, in his opinion, for the most avid researchers of the secrets of nature, naturae arcana. Elsewhere, always in relation to alchemy as an Aristotelian discipline, and citing the argument of Pietro Bono in Preziosa Margarita, he notes how the condemnation of this art presented in the fourth book of the Aristotle's Meteora can be explained by means of an evolution of Aristotle's thought, who wrote the Secretum at a very advanced age, thus having the opportunity to ascertain over time the validity of this discipline. It is interesting to note that Storella does not find it scandalous to refer, as an Aristotelian, to a Hermetic manuscript on alchemy. From Storella's points of view, this is largely consistent with the fact that Aristotle himself in the Secretum Secretorum referred both to the teachings of Hermes and to alchemy as a legitimate discipline. Consistent with this position, in De Utilitate Logices, Storella advocates for the logical foundation of alchemy, also referring in the Tractatus Quinquaginta Contradictionum to the Opuscolo de Alchemia attributed to Albertus Magnus. Now, the reference to Albertus Magnus is important as it also helps us to understand Storella's ideas about magic, as well as the Renaissance Neapolitan reception to Albertine theories about magic. In his De Mineralibus, Albertus Magnus distinguished natural science from magic, which he interpreted as a search from sufficient astrological causes of occult qualities. The notion of occult quality is linked to that of celestial influence in fluxus. The Magus does not seek the primary causes of occult things, as a metaphysician would do, but the sufficient ones, the planets and the stars. Albertus trusts the astrological approach of magicians back to the lesson of Hermes Trismegistus. In the Renaissance, some magicians strategically used the holy authority of Albertus Magnus to legitimize natural magic, a prodigious but licit science capable of marvelous effects. In the Magia Naturalis, Della Porta based natural magic on the astrological doctrine of occult qualities, with an explicit reference to the authority of Albertus Magnus. From a cosmological point of view, this doctrine was thus configured as the foundation of the magical chemical experimentalism promoted by Magia Naturalis. A few years before the publication of the Magia Naturalis, Storella comments on the section of the Secretum Secretorum that highlight the astrological origin of the occult virtues with references to the same doctrine of Albertus Magnus, of whom he expressly cites the De Mineralibus. Storella's commentary on the Secretum Secretorum thus constitutes an interesting example of how, in Naples, at the same historical juncture, the Aristotelian world was moving in the same direction as natural magicians like Della Porta. We have seen how Storella's Aristotelian justification of magic is fundamental to attributing the Secretum Secretorum to Aristotle. This attribution is confirmed by Storella in the Catalogus ac censura operumque an Aristotelia sintes dubitatum, a list drawn up by Storella relating to works to be considered authentically Aristotelian, which is currently preserved in a manuscript in the Ambrosiana Library in Milan. The manuscript is divided into three parts and containing arguments on three distinct issues: the attribution to Aristotle of dubious work, the list of Aristotle's lost or unpublished book, some observation on Aristotelian texts by Greek authors of a stylistic and grammatical nature. In the manuscript, Storella discusses in a philological way the attribution to Aristotle of a series of works, many of which are dedicated to disciplines such as natural magic, astrology, and alchemy. In a phase immediately preceding the publication of the Secretum Secretorum, of which the Catalogus, that is the first part of the Ambrosian manuscript, is a testimony, Storella states that necromantic texts, such as the Necromancia de Reginibus Celestibus and the Mors Anime, are not attributable to Aristotle. However, he does not rule out that a Liber Novum Judicum, the Aristotelian attribution of which he recalls was defended by Guido Bonatti, and a De Diebus Infelicibus, whose attribution is rejected by Giovanni and Gianfrancesco Pico della Mirandola, are to be attributed to Aristotle. Of the latter text, Storella claims to know that there is a copy in Lecce, while he reports that he also viewed a De Viginti Octo Mansionibus Lune attributable to Aristotle in Naples. All in all, these statements are coherent with Storella's discussion of the Conclusiones, orally presented when he obtained his Paduan doctorate and published in 1549, wherein he first argued that natural magic, understood as a practice that excludes any relationship with diabolical entities, can be viewed through an Aristotelian lens. If in the Catalogus ac Caesura of 1554, Storella fails to mention that Aristotle practiced illicit magic, in the Enumeratio Librorum Aristotelis, qui perierunt vel nondum in lucem venerum, also contained in the Ambrosian manuscript and written outside Naples after 1558, he solidifies his conviction that Aristotle did, in fact, meddle in this kind of magic. If it is certain that Aristotle dealt with natural magic, alchemy, and astrology, even in writings that were later lost, then the Liber de Irradiationibus Necromancia Mors Anime, which Storella consulted during his stay in Naples, provides further evidence that he practiced beneficial magic, despite Achillini, Tiberio Bacilieri, and Pomponazzi's insistence that Aristotle refuted belief in the existence of demons. In the Renaissance, the notion of beneficium can take on different meanings, and it is therefore necessary to identify the meaning attributed to it by each author. Literally, as Cornelius Agrippa of Nettshame recalls, beneficial magic must be understood as a part of natural magic capable of producing poisons. Girolamo Cardano considered beneficium a practice inter venena et prestigia worthy of reproach. Since poisons were largely produced for harmful purposes, those opposed to it equated it with necromancy, as it was connected with all evidence to action evil of the devil. On the other hand, Agrippa himself maintained a certain permeability between beneficial magic and necromantic magic. This permeability was absent in Della Porta's Magia Naturalis, where, in a neutral and agnostic vision of research, the Neapolitan Magus inserted the discourse of relating to poisons and witchcraft within the realm of nature. Storella clarifies the meaning attributed to the concept of beneficium in his De Utilitate Logices. In this work, Storella equates the magus beneficus with the necromancer, supporting the logical Aristotelian structure of beneficial magic. According to Storella, magic is duplex. The first form of magic is the natural one and consists of the practical part of the philosophy of nature. The second is the beneficial magic of necromancers. By using the expression practical part of philosophy, borrowed from Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, Storella does not want to downgrade magic to the rank of simple practical art, but, as Bruno will later do, seeks to show that it operates in direct contact with the natural world, while preserving its theoretical dignity. Since the devil, as the author writes, is a great logician, then beneficial magic must be justified by a rigorous logical discourse. On the other hand, if the beneficial magic of necromancers must be logically justified according to the dictates of Aristotle, then this justification cannot fail to include the natural study of the occult properties of poisons, objects of Aristotelian disciplines such as natural magic and alchemy. In other words, Sorella applies the same logical and physico-astrological rules that support natural magic and alchemy to the beneficium of necromancers, thus implicitly challenging, from the point of view of physics and logic, the distinction between natural and necromantic magic. If there can be a distinction between the two forms of magic, it will be of a moral nature, beneficial magic being reprehensible and harmful. In this sense, beneficial magic is attributable to diabolical inspiration while maintaining its natural dimension. In this rationalization of beneficial magic, Sorella sides with natural magicians in this opposition to the belief in witchcraft. As is well known, the problem of the beneficium is closely linked in the Renaissance to the evil action of so-called witches. The legal definition of a witch is a person who had conference with the devil to consult with him to do some evil act. Storella excludes the possibility that the ignorant old women accused of witchcraft could practice that form of magic. Storella contributes to the debate by proposing a kind of philosophical elitism of magic. In Storella's argument on the beneficium, the so-called witches are implicitly excluded from the possibility of practicing it. In fact, if it is necessary to have a solid logical basis to practice beneficial magic, for the devil himself is a great logician, then it is obvious that the alleged witches, being only ignorant old women, will not be able to practice it. Even the true Magus, as Albertus Magnus, Ficino, Giovanni Vico della Mirandola, and the Secretum Secretorum argue, has nothing to do with beneficial practices, since, so Storella precise, magic is a very noble art dedicated to wisdom. Although the scientia, and not a diabolical pact, could allow the magi to practice evil, the sapientia to which they nobly aspire would prevent them from taking such action. In light of these elements, which demonstrate that Storella engaged in the Aristotelian justification of the various forms of magic for numerous years, it is not surprising that in the Numeratio written after the Neapolitan experience, which ended at the end of 1558, Storella comes to attribute a necromantic text such as the Mors Anime to Aristotle. In the works dedicated to logic, published in Naples in the years 1557 and 1561, Storella arrives at the possibility of supporting the logical Aristotelian structure of magic, even a necromantic one, strategically brought back into the natural, though potentially evil, realm of the beneficium. The attribution to Aristotle of the benefico necromantic book Liber de Radiationibus Necromantia Mors Anime becomes a philological assumption which Storella employs strategically, banking on the fact that, as a professor of the time, the proof of the truth of a doctrine is to be found in the text of Aristotle. If with Storella it is possible to speak of an Aristotelian side of magic which establishes its own foundation in Aristotle's logic, it is also possible to express oneself in terms of a Hermetic side of Aristotelianism. This peculiar Hermetic Aristotelianism, springing from the Secretum Secretorum, is constantly intertwined with the Albertine and Pseudo-Albertine tradition, from which it draws support in the process of legitimizing sisters' discipline, such as natural magic and alchemy. If the Albertine lesson, together with his own peculiar image of Aristotle as a magus, serves Storella to justify the tradition of magic from the point of view of science, the ethical lesson of Aristotle, for which the end of true wisdom can only be good, is intertwined in Storella's text with the lesson of Hermes, the wise man that not only the Renaissance magicians but Aristotle himself in the Secretum had explicitly followed in legitimizing magic. According to Storella, the magus, and not the so-called witch, by virtue of his logical skills, has all the tools to do evil through so-called beneficium. However, this is prevented by the ethical dimension of the true magic that the magus practices. The beneficium is thus traced back to nothing more than a scientific study based on Aristotelian logic of the natural properties of poisons, a study that the magus, like Aristotle, will never be able to bend to evil outcomes. Ethics thus intervenes to prevent science from turning into necromancy, while the latter, by virtue of its logical foundations, will resist being practiced even by the so-called witches. It is a path of both scientific and moral legitimation of magic, which in the Renaissance was designed by those philosophers who, on the basis of ancient Neoplatonic and Hermetic wisdom, had defined themselves as magicians, and which Storella, through a philosophical and philological discourse that has its fulcrum in the Secretum Secretorum, strategically locates in Aristotelianism. Aristotle's philosophy is thus torn from the paraphernalia of the inquisitor and the demonologist and becomes the pivotal instrument of the scientific and ethical justification of the Magus investigation of the marvelous in nature. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, let me stop sharing your screen.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Donato. We do have time for some questions. If you would like to ask a question, you can use the raise hand feature, or simply. Any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Just as a conclusion, the part that I'm confused about is the astrological part of the discussion, right? Given the conclusion I just heard towards the end of this, did that remain as part of their, I like to use the word, maybe scientific approach to things? Was astrology still left in that equation of the different paths here? Or was it eventually rejected as early as like the 1500s, what we're talking about here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So, astrology, understood as cosmology, as a mathematical study of the effects of the star on the natural plane of the cosmos, gave a rational mathematical foundation to all the natural and practical sciences of the time: medicine, agriculture, navigation, not only to the secret sciences. Astrology was therefore not intended as a mere form of divination of the future of human being. Storella, in the Secretum Secretorum, Storella clearly distinguishes based on the Secretum these two forms of astrology. Storella is, in fact, somewhat skeptical about astrology as a form of divination, while is clearly a supporter of astrology as cosmology and physics, you know?
Right.
So,
It's a mathematical thing.
yes,
Okay.
yes, because,
In the
exactly.
way we would use, when we look at the planets and all that in a more scientific nature rather than something being manipulated or, I guess in their words, it would probably be what we would say occult usage, right?
Yeah, thinking of physiognomy, for example. Physiognomy was a discipline commonly accepted by the Aristotelian of the time. The problem was its possible interpretation in an in an astrological key.
Right.
What is interesting, I think, is that Storella considers physiognomy as founded on astrological physics, not equating it with astrological divination.
I got you. Okay. That's what I
So
was looking
we
for.
have to distinguish these two kind of
Usage versus
astrology.
the objective
Exactly.
study
Yeah.
of it. Okay.
Exactly.
I get that. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It looks like we have a question in the chat, which I will read, from Dan. Dan is asking, why do you think there was such a need to associate esoteric thought with Aristotle in the Middle Ages?
Sorry, excuse me. Can you repeat? Okay, can you just
Yes. Why do you think there was such a need to associate esoteric thought with Aristotle in the Middle Ages?
why do you think? In the Middle Age, yeah, we are in the 16th century with Storella. So let me start with a general consideration, and then I'll try to answer your question. So each problem, each point of Storella discourse is interconnected with the other. We need overall visions to understand his work and the mission behind him. I think something important was being born in this period, in the Renaissance, and in this context, Naples. That is the problem of the relationships between science and ethics. Storella tries to explain how philosophy, that is Aristotelianism, or rather Hermetic, so magical Aristotelianism, can help us to solve this problem. In the solution proposed by Storella, the themes meet and intertwine both on a scientific and epistemological level and on a social level. Let's start with the legal definition of a witch. A witch is a person without conference with the devil to consult with him to do some evil act. To do this, according to Storella, you must have studied Aristotelian logic. So it is impossible that all women, all ladies, can actually trade with the devil. Also think of John Weir, a pupil of Cornelius Agrippa, the famous Magus Cornelius Agrippa. Weir is a very important figure for understanding the debate on witchcraft in the Renaissance. Regarding our discussion, we can say that if Weir follows the path of a juridical demonstration of the impossibility of condemning witches are only all the psychotic women, Sorella follows a philosophical Aristotelian path. Witches do not have the logical skills to would be needed to carry out the diabolical beneficium. Of course, it's not just women's issue. In fact, Storella then goes on to defend the Magus. If science can cause evil acts to be committed, the ethics of the Hermetico Aristotelian Magus prevent it. I'm about to say something strong, but maybe true. I think that Storella believed in magic regardless of Aristotle. And philologically demonstrating that Aristotle was a magus was a strategy, to legitimize magic. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, it looks like we have one more in the chat. Shall I read it? Um,
Thank you very
how
much.
were Storella's ideas received by his contemporaries? Were there any debates about his scientific explanation of magic? Any opposition from those um, who thought witches were responsible?
Yes, so a little bit of advertising, if I can. I hate advertising, but in this case, I have to. So the paperback edition of my volume, Aristotelianism and Magic in Early Modern Europe, came out the day before yesterday. So maybe could be I can yeah, maybe I can do a little bit of advertising. Anyway, yes, I think that Storella was a kind of teacher of ethics, or magic ethics, in Naples at that time. So I think ethics is the key to understand his project.
It looks like we have time for one more question if anybody else would like to jump in. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. All right. Thank you again, Donato, for this wonderful lecture. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope that you all have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.